So here we are, it's that time of year again. I'm starting to think about my next big road trip in Newfoundland, and I got a very loose itinerary that I'm working on right now. There's a lot of moving pieces. I have made a plan to finally get up to visit the Great Northern Peninsula and then get across into Labrador for the first time in my life. I'm not going to get deep into Labrador, but I'm going to at least cross the strait, set my feet on Labrador ground, get up to at least Mary's Harbor, try the whalers fish and chips, which I've been dying for a long time now, and just explore a little bit of like the southeast corner of Labrador, at least for now. I'll get up and explore the rest later, but for now this is my goal for 2026. When? I don't know yet, but sometime in the summer, I think. So because I'm preparing or trying to prepare my own itinerary for a trip that I'm going to uncharted territory as far as I'm concerned, I've been meaning to do this for you all for a very long time. I've actually mentioned it at least a year ago, maybe longer ago. I was going to prepare a video with little sort of sample itineraries for folks that are arriving, at least on the island portion of the province, because that's all I can speak to from experience. But if you're coming in through the various airports or the couple of ferry terminals, when you land, you might want to know what you can do right there. If you have a plan all mapped out and you're trying to cover as much of Newfoundland as you can, go at it. But if you are limited in time, or you really specifically want to go to like Twillingate for the icebergs, or to like Ellison for the puffins, or whatever the case is, you want to see whales, you need to time it out and you want to know where to go. The point of this video is to help you pinpoint where to enter the island from, which airport or which ferry terminal, and then how to spend your probably limited time in the vicinity of your entry point. Okay, so that's the purpose of this video here today. I'm going to start off with the entry point of the Deer Lake Airport. It basically services the residents on the west coast, all the way up the Great Northern Peninsula as well. And then you head east from the Deer Lake Airport. It'll service the Baysverde Peninsula and quite a big chunk of the island. So I'm starting with that airport to let you know if you're coming to Newfoundland, to the island of Newfoundland in particular, to visit Grossmoor National Park, or for any other number of reasons. If you're flying into Deer Lake Airport, it was interesting to find out during my quick little research on this that Deer Lake is actually the second busiest airport. And I'm not shocked about that, but Gander Airport just has such a higher profile for its historic significance as the literal crossroads of the world, and then of course with the connection to 9/11. But the traffic annually that comes through Deer Lake is significantly higher than the traffic that goes to Gander. But more about Gander later. Let me just say for now, if you're coming into Deer Lake, you have closer access to the amazing Grossmoor National Park. You also have access to, as I said, Corner Brook, and it's a beautiful town. A little further down is Stephenville, and Stephenville is also a charming little town. It's not technically a city, but it has a fairly built-up main street area with a lot of the other conveniences that you'll find in Corner Brook as well, but it's definitely a small town. Under 10,000 people live in Stephenville. There's always going to be sort of a hidden gem that is more easily accessible maybe from whichever particular port. And for the Deer Lake Airport, I'm going to suggest, of course, going to Grossmoor, of course, going to Corner Brook, but turn a little east and go visit the Baysverde Peninsula. I only spent a couple of days on the Baysverde Peninsula, and I went with my mom and dad back in 2024. We stayed in Burlington, which is kind of halfway up the peninsula, and we visited Lassie and Fleur-de-Lis and some of the other smaller towns. The town of Baysverde, of course, you have to drive through there to get anywhere. And then over in the town of Fleur-de-Lis, I've touched on this in other videos, maybe you know about it, maybe you don't, but the unbelievably tragic story of Samantha Walsh, the young girl whose life was taken away by another resident, a young boy at the time. I can't remember his name, and it's not important. It's more about memorializing her and the story behind this small town and the tragedy that everybody dealt with, and the monument to Samantha that exists in the town of Fleur-de-Lis. Just this beautiful, it's like a coffee shop, sort of tourism stop with essentially a museum to Samantha, and it's called Sam's Place, so her name is in it, and her mom, and my understanding is the town got behind her mom and helped create this amazing memorial to this young girl. So if you are looking for something a little different, maybe, to get off the beaten path and really explore Newfoundland, get up and explore the Baie Verte Peninsula, get up to Lissy, get up to Burlington with Sean Majumder and all the efforts that he put into turning Burlington into somewhat of a tourism destination, and then get up to Fleur-de-Lis, which is kind of like at the top of the road leading to the very, very tip of the Baie Verte Peninsula, and just pay a visit to the amazing Sam's Place. One other side note I wanted to mention about Deer Lake Airport is in a couple of my videos I've shown a few signs, one the beautiful, fairly large I Love NL sign, and there's another one with the words "Till we meet again." These two signs were found on the grounds at or near Deer Lake Airport. So the I Love NL sign is right outside the airport, and the sign saying "Till we meet again," it's on your way in. So those two signs are located pretty much on the grounds of the Deer Lake Airport if you're curious. Now, as I mentioned, I haven't been to the Great Northern Peninsula before, I haven't been to Labrador before. That's the purpose of sort of checking this big checkbox off of my list if I'm trying to cover every single town, at least in the island of Newfoundland and eventually in the Labrador as well. I have to cover the big areas. So the Great Northern Peninsula is one of the few remaining large regions of the province that I haven't visited before. If you watch my videos, you already know that. I've mentioned that a few times. Now, this doesn't mean I haven't missed certain towns in areas where I've been, but the other major area that I haven't been to is the south coast from anywhere east of Rose Blanche, Harbour Lacou, and anywhere west of Galtes. So there's a pretty big chunk of very small, remote towns, primarily ferry only, but Burgeo, of course, you can drive to, and that's going to be kind of an anchor point when I get to that. But that probably won't be this year. That's going to be the last big chunk of the island that I'm going to take my time and explore. Maybe this year, who knows, but more than likely in 2027. Now, you're going to see me utilize this map over here a lot throughout this video. It's a great map. It's a reproduction from a map from Paul Parsons. I think the original copyright says 1981, but it's definitely, I feel like it's probably from an even earlier time. A lot of the towns that are on here don't exist, haven't existed for decades, and all the imagery, it just looks like an old style map. My brother got it for me for Christmas back 4 or 5 years ago from the side shop down on Prescott Street. Yeah, I don't know if it's still available or not, but I do, when that shows up in my videos, other times people ask questions about where I got it. That's where I got it. I saw within the last year on the side shop website, it's still listed, but it said not available or not currently available. So if you're looking for it, good luck. That's where I got it. Maybe if you make some noise, they'll make it happen and get it back available if it isn't at the moment. So for folks that are entering the province by ferry at Port aux Basques, if you're coming across from Nova Scotia, chances are that you've already been on the road for a long time. But what I would ask you to do for your sake is if you come across and land in Port aux Basques, when you get off the ferry and you start your drive, instead of driving north on the Trans-Canada Highway, which I think the signage will say east, so it's confusing because you are technically heading east, but at that point, it's still a very northward road from Port aux Basques up through the west coast and then across. Anyway, I digress. Turn east, true east, on the highway, which escapes my mind now, but I'll put the text on the screen when I remember the highway number. Head east along the southwest coast. I've visited many times, but I've never lived on the west coast. I'm not an expert in the west coast, but one area in particular that really captured my heart. It's the southwest coast towns like Marguerite, Fox Roost, Burnt Islands, Isle of Mort, Rose Blanche, Harbour Lacou, and if I'm missing any small towns in there, I apologize, but this area of the province is true Newfoundland, rugged, the houses on the cliffs type of imagery that you get when you think of Newfoundland, and some of the wildest coastline you'll see. The entire region almost destroyed by the hurricane back in 2022, I believe it was. It's an amazing, often overlooked corner of the island, and it definitely has my heart, and I want to, at every chance I get, to mention as the sort of unsung hero to Newfoundland's tourism industry. So many people land in Newfoundland on that corner and don't think to turn in that road and visit these amazing towns. The story of the Harvey family, one of the most amazing stories in Newfoundland history, happened off the coast of the tiny town of Isle of Mort. If you are coming into Newfoundland and you arrive by ferry in Port aux Basques, take the couple of hours in to visit these little towns before heading up the Highway 1, the Trans-Canada Highway, towards Corner Brook, Gander, and St. John's, etc. Now, just around the area where you come off the ferry terminal and hit the actual town of Port aux Basques, this is where you're going to find one of the other I Love NL signs that I'm aware of that I've received a lot of questions about from people seeing it in my other videos. So one of those places to pull over and get a nice selfie or whatever you need to do. But it's the more colorful I Love NL sign that's found in the town of Port aux Basques pretty much as soon as you enter the town from the ferry when you debark. The Argentia ferry. So this is a seasonal ferry. It runs from, there's no hard dates annually, but it depends on weather. That runs from about mid-June through mid to late September every year. And the ferry run to Port aux Basques leaves from Cape Breton Island from North Sydney. It's the same starting point for the Argentia ferry, but it's a much longer route. I believe it's like an 18-hour haul. I'll put the actual numbers for the different runs in the video here because I forgot to check that before I started talking here. But it's a significantly longer run, but it brings you significantly closer to St. John's. It brings you to the Avalon Peninsula. Brings you to the port of Argentia, which is very close to the town of Placentia. So let's talk about that for a moment. Let's say that you're arriving to the island of Newfoundland through the port of Argentia. So from there, some of the obvious routes would be to head over to St. John's. You're about a little over an hour drive away, depending on traffic. Let's say about an hour drive from the Argentia ferry terminal to the city of St. John's. But you're also at that port, you're very close to the town, like very close to the town of Placentia. You're minutes away from the town of Placentia, which is a beautiful little unique Newfoundland town. And you'll see here in the images, there's just nothing else in Newfoundland that quite looks like the town of Placentia. And there's a very deep history in the town as well. So one of the most interesting histories in Newfoundland, which you will find a little bit more on through some of my other videos. But for now, let me just entice you by saying that it's a very historically rich town with a pretty landscape, and you're not going to find much like it anywhere else in the province. If you head south from Placentia, you're on what's called the Cape Shore, and you have a lovely hilly coastal drive that leads you down as far as a town called St. Bride's, which has a beautiful history, and it's also linked to the greatest basketball player who's ever played from Newfoundland, who was a hair away from making it to the NBA. But it's a cool little town. Looks like, from what I'm told, it looks like a lot of coastal Irish towns. This isn't the Irish Loop, it's the Cape Shore Drive, but it's close to the Irish Loop, which I'll get to in a moment. But St. Bride's is also the town that's closest to the amazing St. Mary's Ecological Reserve, with the undescribable bird sanctuary that you just have to be there to experience it to understand how amazing it is. The drive around from St. Bride's through the Cape Shore, coming up through this very south coast on that side of the Avalon Peninsula and Cape St. Mary's itself, you're going to come to the town of Branch, another absolute unsung hero, a beautiful sort of stereotypical Newfoundland town that you really have to see to believe. I'm sure if you're into water sports, jet skis and any kind of like ocean-going craft, it's a great place to go. From when I was visiting last year, there was a lot of activity on the water from what looked to me to be small private vessels, but a lot to do in the amazingly beautiful town of Branch. And then when you come up around through Branch, if you stay kind of along the coast, you will meet up with the Irish Loop. When you hit the Irish Loop, eventually the Salmonair Line side of the Irish Loop, if you turn left or head north, when you hit that, you're going to work your way towards the city. But if you head south, you're now on the Irish Loop. I mean, technically you're still on the Irish Loop either way, but you'll head down south towards the towns of St. Vincent, St. Stephen's, eventually St. Shots into Trepassey. This region, this specific region from say St. Vincent's over as far as Trepassey, is going to blow your mind. If you're coming to Newfoundland for whales in particular, St. Vincent's is one of the hot spots. There's a couple, but the beach at St. Vincent's is probably, especially during the Capelin roll, is probably the place where you're going to see whales closest up to land. The beach, the Capelin rolls into the beach in numbers, which actually that in itself is worth seeing if you can time it out right. Happens in late spring, sometime in June typically, if I'm not mistaken. Please feel free to yell at me in the comments if I'm wrong about that, but I believe it's probably like early June typically. And Capelin is a very important food source for the humpback whales in the area, so they'll come up and dance around on the shore. It's a very famous spot for viewing that. If you head around from St. Vincent's around the southeast tip of the Avalon Peninsula, you'll come across St. Shots, Trepassey. I just made some videos about those two towns, particularly Trepassey, but I've shown shots of St. Shots, and I'm going to do it in this video again, reusing these beautiful shots. That's what you can do if you come in to Argentia. That's what I'm talking about, bringing it all back to folks that are arriving into the island from the port of Argentia. Head up the east side of the Irish Loop. You're now on the Southern Shore Highway, and I can't talk enough about the Southern Shore. It's, the lighthouse grounds at Cape Race and the Mistaken Point Ecological Reserve. You got the towns heading all the way up to Ferryland, up through Bay Bulls, and everything in between. There's so many beautiful towns along an incredibly beautiful coastal drive with, just going up and down hills with the ocean, with nothing beyond until you get to Portugal or Ireland, knowing that it's an amazing ride and it's beautiful. Now, one thing to keep in mind, it can be incredibly foggy in this area. So that's in itself is a bit of an attraction, but just keep in mind, sometimes you may not be able to see anything because the fog is going to be so thick you barely will be able to see outside your car window. But when you can see, it's probably the area with the most amazing views that you're going to see anywhere in the province, and that's saying a lot when we're talking about the island of Newfoundland. One other place that I want to mention for folks that are arriving into the island of Newfoundland through the port of Argentia, rather than heading down the Cape Shore or heading straight over on a beeline to St. John's, drive straight north. If you already know about this is going to be boring to you because you're just kind of sick of the jokes, but if you don't know, there is a town called Dildo in Newfoundland. It's a real place, it's a real town with residents proud of the name. They're not interested in changing it because it's been that name for hundreds of years. But back, I can't believe this is now like over 7 years ago, Jimmy Kimmel did a whole thing when he learned about the town of Dildo, and it was tasteful, it was respectful, it was actually really funny, I think, and now the town has this really cool Hollywood style letters on the hill, Dildo, the Dildo sign. There's a highway that drives up the Trinity Bay coastline, comes down the Conception Bay coastline, and Dildo is on the Trinity Bay shore. So if you arrive to Newfoundland and Argentia, instead of making that beeline straight to St. John's, or if you don't feel like taking the long Cape Shore into the Irish Loop Drive, which I highly recommend doing it, but if you're not into that, you can do a similar but shorter drive up the Bay Verte Peninsula, visiting the towns of Dildo, all the Hearts communities, the town of Beta Verde and Redhead Cove, and then coming back down through the towns of Carbonaire and Harbor Grace and everything else that's there. Now keep in mind, this is the area that was absolutely devastated by wildfires in 2025 in the summer. So if you're watching this year in 2026, I don't know if this is good information for you to sort of plan around for this year, because there's going to be some infrastructure challenges for sure, but it's something to keep in your mind if you're watching this video sometime in the future. Maybe do a little quick search before making plans to visit, but if they're up and running and if you can make it happen, it's a bit of a treat to experience one of the most historically significant peninsulas within the greater Avalon Peninsula. The Gander Airport is located in central Newfoundland, and historically this is a super significant airport. So much traffic going across the Atlantic Ocean would stop for refueling or for whatever other reasons in Gander. This is before technology allowed super long distance flights. Gander was the crossroads of the world. Newfoundland was a very important location for aviation for a number of reasons, but one being the major airport in Gander, and basically the reason why the town of Gander turned into the town it is today. Gander itself has a lot of points of interest for folks that are interested in the 9/11 story, the super significant involvement that the town of Gander and surrounding towns like Appleton and other towns had in jumping in to help folks in need during September 11th, 2001. But there's also, if you're thinking about memorials and important markers, just outside the town of Gander is the Silent Witness Memorial, which is also related to the United States, but it was something that happened in 1985. It was a flight that stopped in Gander on the way back to the U.S. from Egypt for refueling around a little bit before Christmas. It was in the month of December, and the plane that was carrying all of these servicemen and women and flight staff went down shortly after takeoff due to ice on the wing. And there is a site just on the highway, just outside the town of Gander, that if you are in that area, I highly recommend going to pay a visit to just sort of feel the gravity of that particular area. It's a beautiful memorial to an unbelievable tragedy that happened on Newfoundland soil, and it's very respectful, and it's just kind of you feel something when you're standing there knowing what happened on that site over 30 years, over 40 years ago now. But if we're talking about more tourism-related things, I'm going to say Gander Airport is the closest airport to Twillingate and to Fogo Island and to the towns along the northeast coast. So Twillingate is a bit of a hot spot. It has a high profile in terms of tourism in Newfoundland, deservedly so. The town itself is beautiful. It's rich in history. There's a lot of museums. There's the beautiful lighthouse there. But it's also known to be the iceberg capital of the world. It's a place where you can view, some years it's better than others, but you can view icebergs in numbers that you can't view anywhere else. And I talked about whales earlier. It's another place where you're going to potentially see whales playing. And the time of the year certainly will play a role in whether you see icebergs or whales. But I saw icebergs and whales on the same day in a hot July day, and this is probably 2023, not 2022. The biggest iceberg I could have possibly imagined seeing in 30-degree weather, with a lot of whales playing around. And Twillingate's worth going to visit for so many reasons. Fogo Island, very close to Twillingate on a map, but it takes a long time to get from Twillingate to Fogo Island because of the nature of the roadways and the transportation system in Newfoundland. But Fogo Island is another place that needs to be seen and experienced to really understand. Photos and videos will help. Me talking about it will help, but you really need to see it for yourself. It's unbelievable. And just like that's all I can say. It's an unbelievable place. The polarizing N, a lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it, and not a lot of people can stay there because it costs a year's worth of salary before you can consider staying there. But it's in my mind, it's impactful in many ways. Whether you like it or not, it does generate a lot of income for the island, and not just the inn itself, but the organization Shorefast behind, or at least related to the inn. They're doing a lot of great work with making sure that people that want to be living on the island can. Fogo Island's a really interesting place, beautiful. However you feel about the inn, it's very polarizing, but there's a lot of good that comes from it, even if most of us will never be able to afford to stay there. It's a very iconic building in Newfoundland that sort of, when you see it, you're like, how is this here? How does it fit here? I think that's why people oftentimes don't like the inn, because it sort of really doesn't fit, but in a lot of ways it does. In its own way it does, but that's it's a confusing topic to talk about. So just go and experience Fogo Island for yourself. The inn is located right in Joe Bat's Arm, but there's a number of communities around the island that you will feel different things by being in the different communities, right? So go visit Fogo Island, and if you do, you might want to fly in through Gander Airport to do that. And one of the areas that seems to be getting a little bit more of a higher profile recently is that northeast coast that I mentioned. So the town of Greens Pond, the amalgamated town of New West Valley, up into Lumsden with the amazing beach, and the slowly but surely becoming more popular beach at Cape Friels. This is an area that you'd be closer by flying into Gander to get to these places than anywhere else, but it's still kind of in its own area. It's not exactly close to Gander Airport, but it's a beautiful area that I think because of Greens Pond and because of Lumsden, the beaches at Lumsden, more and more Newfoundlanders are starting to know about it and they're visiting it. But if you're not familiar with Newfoundland, I think it's a must-see, but people just don't know about it. So it's not exactly a secret, but it's a region that I don't think many people think to visit, but I highly, highly recommend visiting Greens Pond, visiting the town of Newtown, visiting the beaches at Lumsden. It's a very nice area, and I can't say enough good things about it. But now if I had to pick something that I feel is even more off of people's radar, but I want to scream this from the rooftops, I wish more people would visit this area. And if you watch my videos, I bet you know exactly where I'm going to say. But if you fly into Gander, you're going to be at the closest point to begin your journey to this region. It's a pretty secluded area. It's kind of hard to get through. There is one major road that will drive down there, but I'm talking about Harbor Breton, basically the Conagra Peninsula, the area around where Galtes is, and the other side where Bellorum is. This is an area that I wasn't ready for. It's about 2 years ago now when I made my visit to Harbor Breton, but I went because I wanted to see it and I had no expectations, but it blew my mind. I made a number of videos about Harbor Breton and what I'm talking about when I say it blew my mind, but it is hands down the most beautiful town that I've been to, in my opinion. You can argue if you want, but it's also close to the amazingly beautiful Bellorum and the fascinating Galtes. So if you have an opportunity to visit these towns in particular, Harbor Breton, Galtes, and Bellorum, but the whole region, of course, it's a place that has the traditional sort of houses on the rocky shore, but the rocky shores around there oftentimes are fjords, and you just don't see that anywhere else. So my tip here is, if you are flying into Gander, go visit Twillingate and Fogo Island, get over to Greens Pond, visit the towns, Gander, Grand Falls, get around central Newfoundland. But if you have the time, get down to see Harbor Breton, see Bellorum, see Galtes. And if you want to see those places, I mention it here in the Gander section because it happens to be the closest point of entry to that region of the island. Now finally, there's not a whole lot to say about St. John's. I've already made a dozen videos specifically about St. John's and what you can do, like guides to St. John's. So I would invite you to go check out any of those videos for more, but it is by far the port where more people enter into the island from than anywhere else by quite a bit. So just to make a note, I don't want to ignore, it's my city. I grew up in Mount Pearl, so if you're from St. John's, Mount Pearl may as well be Mars. But when you're in Mount Pearl and you're outside Newfoundland, it is essentially just a suburb of St. John's. So it's the area of the province that I know the best, and I know it intimately, and you can see from my other videos that I do. But I will say, if you fly into St. John's and if you only have limited time, like if you're coming for a work trip and your time is limited, there's enough to do in the city to keep you occupied and get a true Newfoundland experience. All of these other places that I mentioned in this video so far, if you're interested in getting around, either add the time to your itinerary, don't try to rush everything, or if you are limited in your time, if you have these specific spots on your mind that you want to see, then you know now to save a bit of time. It might cost a little bit more to fly into Gander as opposed to St. John's, for example, but if you know that these are the areas you want to be and you only have 5 days, consider flying into Gander or Deer Lake or whatever the case may be. But if you fly into St. John's and your time is limited, you can definitely keep yourself occupied and have a great Newfoundland experience in St. John's without leaving the downtown area. So if you want to know more specifically about St. John's, I won't keep this video going any longer. I'll just draw your attention over to this video right here where you can see some specific tips on what to do if you're in downtown St. John's for a limited period of time and you want to see as much as you can. This should give you a bit of an idea of what you can do. Alright, thanks for watching this one. Hopefully I'll see you over there. Until next time, see you, loves you, bye.